Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Really excited to be joined by Stephen Rhoades here for today's webinar, 7 Steps for AI Success. Before we get started, I want to do a little bit about Synergy Technical for those that are registered who have not worked with us before or are new to the Synergy Technical name. Then we'll also introduce ourselves. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to hear more about how to implement AI successfully in the enterprise. Synergy Technical as an organization was founded back in 2011. We're headquartered out of Richmond, Virginia. We've been focused on cloud migrations, security and compliance initiatives, how to make a more productive end user in a secure way is one of our taglines. So we've had rapid growth over the 14 years of existence now. We've been a Microsoft managed partner since we were 3 months old, which is a very select group, and even part of the Microsoft AI program dating back over 2 years now. I had to think about what today is, but over 2 years now, and part of a very select group around their Copilot Jumpstart program, which is only, hopefully we're looking to be the third partner in that program. So we've had a lot of AI successes. We've seen some organizations adopt it really successfully. We've also seen some that haven't gotten, out of the initial pilot group, and we want to talk to you today about how to avoid that and make the most productive use cases of AI independent of the tool, independent of the type of AI. And we're going to talk about what all that means too, if you need an explainer beyond, ChatGPT and generative AI. So technology has really been Synergy Technical's world. Our growth story has led us to perform work in all 50 states, 70 plus countries. We've deployed and managed over 20 million licenses of Microsoft 365 now. And now the Copilot numbers, as one of the AI tools, continues to increase. We also have an IT managed services practice. So if you're a firm that's looking for outsourcing, maybe not just an AI practice and a program manager, we'll talk about today, but some of that monitoring, patching, and updates, security services. If you have a smaller team or you're looking to outsource some of that day to day, we have a field there too that can help. So I think that's good on the Synergy Technical background. Let's have my co-presenter introduce himself, and then we'll get into the agenda for today.
Hi, thanks, Dan. I'm Stephen Rhoades with Synergy Technical. I'm our Director of Business Applications. I've got over 20 years experience in IT, working with managing and implementing applications and data solutions. With Synergy, I've really helped a lot of our clients in kind of implementing a lot of our productivity and security solutions on the Microsoft stack. But more recently, helping our clients with their AI strategy and implementation. So I'm excited to be with you here today.
There's a really good correlation because a lot of the transformation projects you've been doing over the course of your career, there's a different tool now, it's called AI, but it's similar conversations with the IT organization and with the ultimate end users on how it's going to impact the organization, make them more productive, and still making sure they're secure.
Right? Absolutely. Definitely.
There's a great correlation. We're excited to have you in the role. I'm Dan Finn. I'm our Vice President of Sales. I've had almost 15 years now in technology and consulting roles. We spent the last 6 at Synergy Technical. And really excited to be part of this growth story that we have here. So I lead our sales organization. I've worked, like I said earlier, directly with Microsoft since May of 23, when the OpenAI partnership was announced. We were able to get in front of product managers and understand what is generative AI, the semantic index, the grounding capabilities, how they were going to approach this in a fair and inclusive way, and also adhere to all your privacy and compliance concerns. And we were one of the first to market with a data readiness engagement, which we'll talk about, how that applies to your AI strategy, whether it's Microsoft data or beyond. And we're both proud graduates of a MIT course this spring.
Absolutely.
Luckily, it was virtual. We didn't need to travel and take time away from Synergy necessarily, but that was an 8-week course on artificial intelligence and implications for business strategy. So that covered everything from machine learning and neural networks to generative AI, which is the reason a lot of people are looking at it now and adopting it. But machine learning has been around for a long, long time. Robotic process automation. And I tell a lot of our customers we consult with that AI has been a field since 1957, right? So this is not new in the truest sense, but it definitely has a hype to it.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to understand, there's been hype and buzzwords before. There's been a very real hype curve here with artificial intelligence. But what we're seeing at a national level is, we're really coming off of that curve and starting to drive real business transformation with metrics behind, the return on that investment, and that's exciting to see. We were talking offline earlier, off air, on previous buzzwords, the Internet of Things, the blockchains of the world. We've been in this industry for those. And maybe they were buzzwords, maybe they were real. We can argue that on a different day. But you don't hear those words being mentioned as much. I still can't explain what blockchain is to you, so don't ask. But I think artificial intelligence is real. It's here to stay. I think it's going to be here for the next 40 plus years. And we're here to talk about, why adopt it and how to adopt it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The difference in those technologies, a lot of times they were very much focused on certain fields or industries, but now we're finding with generative AI and other AI tools that now these are applicable to just about everyone. So excited to talk about the six steps we suggest.
Yeah. And the other thing that course covered was implications on the workforce and having AI program managers and why it's so important to adopt it. So we baked that into our 7 steps to success. I think without further ado, why don't we get into step 1?
Sounds good.
So step 1 is forming an AI committee, or some are calling it an AI council. But this is huge. This is pivotal. There's a reason it's step 1. And let's talk a little bit more about why that is.
Yeah. So a lot of times, our AI implementations are sometimes just led by IT, right? They're the ones the first to pilot the tools. But what we're really finding is that you need to form a cross-functional group, something that spans the entire org and has a mix of different, basically that represents every part of the organization. So leadership, so that you have executive sponsorship. You need IT and your data science and data leads in that. But also you need to basically have leads from every business department, right? So your business functions have to be present to help guide these, be part of this committee. And then you need functions like legal, compliance, HR. But really, the key thing here is to make sure everyone, you're inviting them to this group and you're forming this group, that their expectations are set in terms of what their goals are, right?
Right.
So the most important thing to understand is that this is the group that's going to be making the AI decisions on tools and projects that are aligning with the company strategy. So the biggest thing we need to make sure is that when we're choosing projects and choosing tools, that they map to our organizational, key goals, right? Do we worry about, is our goal productivity gains? Is it around customer experience, cost reduction? So really identifying those and mapping those. And also, this is ultimately going to be the group we're going to talk about priorities later on, but this will be the group that helps to set those priorities and the order of operations of use cases and projects. So really providing that direction and providing that roadmap.
I know we have a lot of technical folks in attendance just from our business structure, but so no offense to IT teams, but we've seen failure when the pilot group is just IT, right? So you're saying that I'm concerned about the data security and the governance we have wrapped around it. I want to keep pilot within my trusted group. But we don't see beyond IT in most cases, right? So we need to pull in those other business functions for that use case identification and understanding really what are their challenges on a day-to-day basis where we can make them more productive, where we can save on raw material in our inventory, where we can be better schedules in a manufacturing space, where we can provide a better service to our end users or our customers. We're supporting our end users, which are the organization and its employees, but we need to be able to pull all those use cases together. And one thing you hit on was these become your AI champions throughout the organization.
That's right. Yep.
And I think it's pivotal all the way down to how you invite them and the messaging to the AI committee. We've seen, a very quick, brief invite saying, will you be part of an AI committee for us? And there's almost an underlying expectation that you get to nominate your AI tool of choice. Everyone raises their hand and votes, and then they get that AI tool. And that's not what the committee is for, right? They can definitely suggest the right tooling for their challenges.
Yep.
But being a part of this committee does not mean they're going to get every tool they nominate, right? They're going to have input. But
right. No, this is going to be the group that creates your governance framework, right? So they're going to be doing things like defining the acceptable use policies, right? Like with generative AI, we know that, those tools can hallucinate, and the results that people get if they just copy and paste them or use them straight away, that, there's risk there. So part of this group is creating those acceptable use policies, making sure that those are applied later down the road when we go to implement.
Right.
And then also that we're confirming which ones are the approved tools, and what's the process then to evaluate other tools, which we're going to be talking about, and then any compliance regulations that the organization is beholden to, right? HIPAA, GDPR, and how do we make sure that we're monitoring the usage and compliance of the organization in the tools that we sanction.
Yep.
So a lot of responsibility in this group. Is not just the ones that get their pet projects,
right,
and get to just kind of
funded and licensed. I create better PowerPoints now. Yay,
exactly.
Me. So the acceptable use policies is great too. We're forming this in the AI committee. And there's some great governance tools that have been published. I know the Microsoft nonprofit team even did one specific to that industry that really gives you a full template that you can decide which ones are appropriate for your organization and enter your specifics for your SOPs, your data compliance standards. But you're seeing this independent of what industry or vertical you're in. You need acceptable use policies. Everything from the end user that you're giving AI to should not be prompting for sensitive information they know they don't have access to, they know they shouldn't have access to how do we handle that data if it is exposed in the response to a prompt. So we want that documented and signed off on before we're giving AI tooling. And the best practice here too has to allow that document to be iterative, to allow that to be a living document, because as we identify and prioritize use cases, this might need to change. We may need to add clauses. We may need to remove some clauses. So that AI committee has a lot on their plate. There is a commitment from them from a time perspective, but they get to become the AI champions to their team. And that's the give that we need to communicate as we form this group.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So the AI committee is formed. We created some acceptable use policies. Now what?
All right. So now, we're going to want to now start to interview our champions and start to identify things like their challenges and pain points and the business use cases, right? So this is really where we find that first of all, in your champion, ultimately with your champions, you're going to want to have probably representation from every department. Doesn't mean that you're going to interview them all at once, but it means that this is where you start to kind of look at that, look across the organization for the use cases. And what you'll find is a lot of these users, they can come up with them pretty quickly, right? So they know, all right, well, we need to automate this, a basic IT service call process because we know it's so painful and time consuming, or we need to help build a process to standardize this business document build that we're always doing on a monthly or quarterly basis, or even sometimes daily. So they're going to be the ones that help to surface these use cases, and this is really where you're going to be, kind of talking through which processes can AI help with. Right. And there may be some education that needs to happen here because, there are going to be tools that people are familiar with, and you're going to start out with the ones that are approved. But basically, there may be an opportunity to train up some of your, educate your users on things like generative AI, machine learning, robotic process automation when we go to look at tools. So
what I find interesting as you break down the different types of AI is typically in iteration one of our AI stakeholder interviews is you hear some of that lower hanging fruit. And I think it's because generative AI is the trend, right? So they're saying, boy, it would be great to recap that meeting I was just in, give me my meeting minutes, tell me what the call to actions were. Great, we can do that. That's low hanging fruit. We can implement that, right? Mm-hmm. But you see unless the AI committee is stacked with data scientists, which we've seen as well, typically your machine learning models, those 6 to 12 month projects that are very data intensive on the back end before you get to the end user interface, typically those are further down the process because we're spending that first iteration explaining the capabilities of different AIs and understanding where does the end user interact with the data and where do those data sets live and what really are their challenges. So I think we create a lot of quick wins, typically early, but again, through an iterative process, you come up with these larger scale, real transformative use cases as well. And then we need to prioritize those.
And prioritizing, how do we do that, right? So basically we need to identify what's the ROI capability, or, possibilities for these tools, right? Mm-hmm. So am I going to be reducing the time to draft a document? Am I going to be reducing the number of hours to complete a process? And what are the metrics that we're using, right? So, in this process, you're going to want to say, okay, what will we expect if we implement this tool and automate this process or use it for this process? We're going to be able to, improve our customer satisfaction scores on our website with our clients up to 50% or reduce the cost of IT support calls by 30 or 40%, something to that effect. And you want to then kind of have this matrix between ROI and feasibility. So like you said, the quick wins are going to be the ones where there's no other prerequisite projects or implementations or anything else that has to come in the way. Usually we're starting with these generative AI tools. Everyone has experience with them. That's usually the low hanging fruit because, a lot of these business processes, there's common kinds of workflows across departments and across industries. But yeah, you're going to look at your quick wins and be able to look across that kind of matrix between what's feasible, what gives you the highest ROI, what would apply not just to this group of users, but then potentially to, maybe the whole organization.
Yeah. So typically I'd say we're finding, 5 to 10 use cases identified through that initial round of stakeholder interviews. We're prioritizing them based on real KPIs and metrics that we can track. If you can't track it, how are we going to know it produced the outcomes we're hoping for, right?
Yep.
So then we have to select some tooling. And what's interesting, before I get into that, I guess around the prioritization and use cases, we can have all the KPIs and metrics in the world. Sometimes this boils down to, hey, line item number 4 on our priority chart, the CEO wants it, and he wants it yesterday, or she wants it yesterday. The other one, was the sales interns think it would be really nice. And we think it's a transformative use case, but there's a little data project behind it. And it's, so sometimes we're prioritizing based on cultural needs as well at an organization. But we can help coach you through that in some of these, value workshops that we deliver.
Yeah, but again, also hopefully the AI committee is there to kind of vet all those decisions, right? Yep. Like make sure, okay, well, does it still map? It is the CEO's pet project, but does that map to our goals, right?
Yep. And I think the tooling selection can help you make a decision with that, right? So we've prioritized our use cases. Maybe we can run a couple in parallel, or we're just tackling number 1 use case. But let's talk about some of the selection criteria that we need to put behind what tool is the best fit for that use case now.
Yep. So a number of things we have here. We've got what are the capabilities of the tool? Is it an existing approved tool? Is it something that we're going to need to look for some alternatives and research other tools? What are the security features of the tool? Access and management. How do we monitor and audit its usage? And compliance, right? Are we beholden to regulatory frameworks? Do we have to make sure that this tool will support things like GDPR, HIPAA, and is responsible AI in place for this, right? Like how's our data being used if we're prompting with this tool? How do we protect our IP and reputation if we're using these tools? We want to make sure that no data is being shared or exposed in a way that we don't understand. So a number of things there. And data sovereignty, right? Like where is this data being stored? Do we own this data, our data? What happens when we leave this tool? And do we get to, remove the data, take it away? We need to understand that thing. And ultimately, too, with generative AI, we want to make sure, do we understand it? Well, is our data, our prompts, our files, are they being used to train the foundational model? Right. In most cases, you don't want.
Yeah, that would be a very scary scenario. I'm throwing IP in to create a better output for my organization, and now it's trained into the model and available to other subscribers to that tool.
Exactly.
So, obviously we built the slides, but I like the way pricing is listed last, and that's a key criteria. We've heard at a conference recently of, someone raised their hand and said, how can I vet and rank all the different AI solutions that are out there? And the moderator almost did laugh. Like there's no way to do that, right? So with each use case, you need to apply these selection criteria specifically against the use case. We cannot boil the ocean. And at least that I'm aware, there's no tool that exists that says, here's every vendor that calls themselves AI or truly is AI. And it sounds humorous, but there literally have been tools that call themselves AI, and it's a sweatshop of 700 people on the back end that are actually performing the function. So we need to individually vet these tools before we get to price, because these things are a bigger concern. Capability, data sovereignty, privacy, security. because some of those things that are $2 are actually quite a concern for these other selection criteria. So yes,
Yep.
price is important, but another component to price and total cost of ownership would be what would these tools imply to our data architecture? Are there migrations behind the scenes? Are there data
Right.
cleaning that need to happen to expose the right data to the right tool? These are all very important decisions as we select.
Right. And we'll talk about that next. I mean, the other thing too, with cost is not just the licensing of the tool, but it's the ongoing maintenance of the tool. Are we going to incur any kind of, any kind of impacts on our IT team to support this, right? Those kind of projects. Sometimes those will come out in the use case prioritization because then you understand you got some dependencies there,
Right.
some other projects. So maybe those won't be coming up next. So usually when we got into this step, and it may overlap it a little bit, but basically, we know we need to address this use case. It's a priority for us. But what's the tool that makes sense? And usually you're looking first at the tools that are available to you on the platforms that you're living already, right? Like with a lot of people with Microsoft 365 Copilot, we're already in that universe. We already understand how our data is being used. We already trust that vendor. And so if they have tools available to bring to bear to our business processes, you typically want to look at this first.
Right. That speaks to user adoption.
Right.
Am I going to make the user go to a new app and learn a new interface, or can I bake it into where they're already performing their work?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so all of these are great selection criteria. I think that user adoption piece we'll hit on, but let's talk about the data governance or how do I make sure my data is ready now for the tool that I've chosen.
Yep.
And if all this sounds like a lot, you talk about the pricing and the total cost of ownership. We are having very honest conversations with our clients on, an AI program manager. And, your team is probably stretched thin already. So to stack this whole new layer on, it's keeping us busy. It's keeping IT departments busy. People are looking at adding headcount for this, right? So that is a key component to cost. So we've picked a tool now, and now we need to go back and say, do I have the right data available to that tool?
Yep.
Am I over permissioned or under permissioned? How do I know I'm not overexposing sensitive data?
That's right. So what data do we need? Where is that data located? What are the sources that we're concerned with? And what's the quality of that data, right? Is that data organized? Is it cleaned? For example, you may want to run some tools against some policy documentation stores that you have, but what if that policy documentation is a mess? It's out of date, right? Then your tooling is going to bring back junk responses just by the quality of the data. So you may identify those kinds of things that you need to review and clean up. And then data classification, right? Where is your sensitive data? Is there any of it that needs to be properly looked at and labeled that are, again, going back to the AI advisory committee, that are part of your framework that you need to address, right? So if we have a confidential classified data, how are we making sure that if that's part of what's at play here for this use case, how are we dealing with that? So do we have some prerequisites there, right, to protect that data? And then from an access perspective, who has access to it? How is it permissioned? Well, how is it secured, right? Are we under permissioned? Are we over permissioned? We've had cases where organizations that have a ton of data sitting in SharePoint learn in the process of doing an assessment of their data that, oh my goodness, we had settings so that basically we're generating a lot of org-wide links to documentation stores that are pretty sensitive. And so now you've got a prerequisite cleanup activity around that. So a lot of these kinds of things need to be looked at. Is our data, is any of this data being shared externally? And does that need to be addressed? So a lot of things to look at there.
Yeah. So I was making notes as you spoke because there were key things I wanted to make sure we talk about here. So one would be version history. As you talk about data cleanliness, if we're talking documents, right? Are we exposing previous versions of a document, or are they hidden from our AI tooling because we save over those iterations, right? That can be a good and a bad thing.
It's a nice detail, yeah.
Maybe I want to be able to look at red lines or clauses that we've changed in our proposals, in our drafted documents. Well, I can't do that unless they're saved as V1, V2, V3.
Which is interesting because that goes against some of these tools, like our Microsoft, our co-authoring tools basically allow us to not have to worry about versions and how we're working from one document. But yeah, then you may have issues where that might be now a training thing or a process change in the way you're storing those
Right.
documents to be able to have the process you're looking to do for comparison work differently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it can be, it can also be detrimental, right? If we're exposing previous versions for this one use case, but now we're also running a generative AI prompt and it's pulling out old data or data that we've had to
Exactly.
go back to correct.
Exactly.
So we can talk through, segmenting that data, maybe building agentic AI that points to just a very specific data set. But this whole data readiness conversation is we've done a ton of workshops for clients. We're one of the first in the Microsoft ecosystem to publish a templated data readiness engagement for your 365 environment. We've talked a lot about Copilot and why we're big fans of it because it can drop into your Microsoft 365 graph and contextualize the data, the files, the emails, the chats you already have access to. Well, equally important is it already has understanding of the data loss prevention controls you have in place, of the identity that you have configured, the access to the different locations, document labeling. If you haven't done it, you're probably going to see yourself leaning into document labeling because of artificial intelligence. And that's one thing that really excites me. We've been using it for 10 plus years at Synergy Technical. Whenever the release date is, I'm pretty confident we were rolling it out to play with it, and we've implemented it ever since. But for 6 years at Synergy, I've been working with customers saying, how do we create a more secure environment? And one of the biggest pushbacks has always been document labeling. And it goes all the way into emails and chats and Teams channels. It's a big end user friction. Let's just call it what it is. There's a training component to it. You typically get pushback, typically from leadership. They need to label their emails now. So we can now go through and use AI as the carrot to implement better security measures that we have wanted to be implementing all along, right?
Yeah.
So because we're enabling your AI tool of choice out of the AI committee, we're also going to have automatic labeling of our data, and we can create what that DLP policy is, key in on sensitive words and label our data appropriately. We can also say you as an end user are going to have to label your data moving forward. That's a cultural and technical decision. But because of AI, we're able to maybe slide that in under the rug, and we're seeing that successfully work, which excites me because we should all be there already. No fault of anyone worldwide, we are not, but because of AI, we're making huge jumps in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. These projects can kind of jumpstart those kinds of initiatives that may have stalled before,
right?
Because these tools are so powerful and they can expose your access to things you didn't know you had, and so they can drive that. So yeah, and it also kind of goes back to the whole tool selection thing, and when tools like Microsoft Discover Copilot are on the platform, then like you said, you have ready access to tools that help you secure and govern that data, but also you have an understanding of how your data is being used, right? So you know that it's not training the model, that it's staying within a service boundary with a vendor that you already trust. So the same kind of concepts go back to any other tool that you're looking at. It's kind of what I'm getting at.
And you can tell we're passionate about this space. And so we've gone through 4 steps to success. We formed an AI committee. We prioritized use cases. We went through the selection criteria to pick a tool. We've performed our data readiness. We're fairly confident now we can roll this out. That sounds like a lot of work. We're not minimizing it. It can be a lot of work depending on the use case we pick, the tool we pick, the data we're ingesting. But maybe let's get to the fun part now, right? I'm finally going to get AI into my users' hands and create this pilot group. So let's talk about some best practices once we've gotten into step 5 pilot.
Yeah, so here's where you're now, you're deploying this tool to your trusted the subset of users that are in the pilot. You're providing training, but you're also making sure that you have a feedback cycle for them, right? You want to make sure that you're identifying any issues before you roll this out any further. That's where you uncover more data readiness issues. It's also where you might find some security holes, a need to maybe enhance the training, or even update your policies, because of some of the requirements that are coming out of this implementation. But the other thing you want to make sure is that you're able to measure the impact, right? So in the pilot, you want to make sure that you're capturing the usage and you're understanding, okay, is that potential to drive the ROI the way we projected before you go to scale it.
Right.
Now, we were talking about this earlier. Some of these pilots and some of these projects are small, right? They only impact 6 to 10 people. And so that, the moving from pilot to adoption is kind of pretty immediate. But a lot of times what you're doing is you're taking, a broader tool and you're learning organizationally how to leverage it in certain use cases, but then you are looking to expand it across other departments.
Right.
Right. And so this is really where understanding how it's being used, what's effective from a training perspective and, a usage perspective, and having that feedback from that pilot group. So
right.
uncovering all those kinds of things before you roll out and ensuring that you're able to scale it.
Yeah, and all key points, and the reason we listed trusted team members first is you need that honest feedback. You need them to be working with the tool, taking time out of their normal operating procedures to try new things with the AI tool you've selected. But also, very real scenario, there could be a response with sensitive information, right? So you need them to flag that, document it, get it back to the team and say, how do we address this, and put the proper guardrails in place before we go out to the larger organization.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times, these initial pilots are sometimes the same AI champions that you were interviewing for the use case, right? They're part of this group too, maybe a subset of their users. So absolutely.
And that whole process has provided some training for them on how we got to this point. So we've created our AI champions. We've piloted. We think there's an ROI behind it. Let's talk about the org-wide rollout, or the step we're calling adoption and change management, which, humble brag, we have a specialization in the Microsoft world. So we pride ourselves as leaning into this space and being pretty good at it. But let's talk about how you be good at it at your organization.
Yep. So obviously we're developing our change management plans, our communications, and our training. We're signing the tool users. We're rolling it out properly. But once we do that, we train them, we want to have a feedback cycle, a mechanism for them, just like in the pilot, but at a broader level, to be able to provide feedback. And this is really where, the use of these tools and the way that you train is sometimes more of an art than a science.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. Like this is, when with generative AI tools, how you prompt and what you're prompting, it has a huge impact into your results, right? So we've had highly intelligent, experienced users on certain applications using these generative AI tools and expecting something out of it that you're not going to get from a simple prompt. But a different user, maybe even with less experience in that domain, will come to it and be able to provide the prescriptive prompts and process in such a way that they're actually getting back the results that this other user didn't. And so having a way to get that kind of feedback on usage and what works, what doesn't, back to your users is part of this cycle that we're recommending.
Yeah.
Right?
And that continuous feedback cycle, that there's data that shows this. If you treat it like any old technology, I'll use an ERP system rollout. Maybe you create a month-long training program. We move to this new platform. Here's how to use all the modules you'll be exposed to. You train your users. They can use it for their tenure at your organization now. Right? They might go 10 years without needing another training on your Oracle ERP. AI is not that way. So there's data that shows if you give an AI license to a user, any AI, right, and you give them one training, they do a lot of prompting on day 1 and 2. Maybe they're not getting the responses they're looking for. Maybe they are, but it starts to fade after about 48 hours. And it was the new cool thing, but they go back to the way they had always worked. I know I can build this PowerPoint presentation. It may take 45 minutes, but I can get it done. I need to get it done. I'm going to go. You need that continuous feedback cycle, that continuous prompt training to say, hey, maybe that did fail the first time around, but let's talk about why. Let's understand what was in the prompt. Where did I prompt? What application did I put that prompt into? What data should I really have access to? And that's the art. I've been calling the art, almost a creative user. And I'm probably more of the science users. You tell me the 3 different scenarios I'm going to make the most use out of that tool with. I run those 3 different scenarios into the ground. But you need that art behind it of saying, but what if I created this unique add-on to it and gave it the exact response? AI is going to give you what you ask of it. So the more prescriptive you are in your prompt writing, the better your response is. And we see a lot of users try to create a 5-word prompt, and then they don't get a response they're looking for. Like, we need to work on the prompt, or the art of AI.
Right. Correct.
But your center of excellence allows you to do that. It creates this space where not just your AI champions are in there getting that user feedback and being able to adjust your use policies, or say, maybe this is a different tool we need to better train them on, but also give that feedback of, I ran this cool prompt and looked at the output. And maybe we want to copy and paste and share it to the rest of the team, or maybe we want to build an agent around it, something that goes even beyond that.
Absolutely, yeah. So the ability for people within the business, sharing their use case, or, their prompts or their use cases is typically going to generate more ideas by other people on how they can use it. So it's all kind of a virtuous like feedback cycle, but you have to have that mechanism to capture it, right? You've got to have a way for people to come back to it, be encouraged to look to it. And this is also where your champions come into play too, right? Because throughout this whole life cycle, they're also, making sure that these kinds of areas get updated, or they're pushing for people to use the tools there. So they may be kind of playing that role as well.
And the final point here, which you hit on earlier, and we don't have it on the slide, but ROI. We created the metrics, and we need to measure the users using it. There's some great tools we have available. The AI vendors have been enabling tooling as well that lets you track your licensed users participating across the different applications, what kind of prompts they're running, even from an auditing capability, right? But when we're talking ROI, there's some calculators that can say, not just the productivity gains based on the amount of usage or the amount of licensed users working across applications, but also the real life costs behind this. So we're throwing a lot at you, and you're starting to see like maybe I do need to identify or bring in an AI program manager to moderate the center of excellence, to assign licensing, to sit with individual users and work through prompt training, to schedule the right trainings for the right tools at the right time. You guys are stretched thin already, so maybe we do need to look at that role. So there's a cost to that. So we can bake that all into our calculations and really give you a cemented ROI coming out of this org-wide rollout. And that's what I'm really excited to deliver those to our end users, because at this point, you're at a 6 to 12 month cycle, and you're looking at renewing your licensing already, and you're saying, did I get the value out of it that I thought? So you really need that documentation to go back to your board, to go back to your CFO and say, here, it's proven, it's documented, this is our data, I'll vouch for it, and it's worth the renewal.
Yep, absolutely. And it's also going to give you the metrics that then help you identify opportunities for training, right? To continue to use the same tools that you have, or get more out of them, right?
And potentially the opportunities are to go back to other use cases, or to look at other tools, or extending agentic AI you're probably seeing in the headlines, adding agents in to add in those use cases that you've identified through the center of excellence. So our final and last step is like any good shampoo, rinse and repeat, right? You've created a successful win on AI in your enterprise. Congrats, bravo, round of applause. Now we go back to our prioritized use cases, right?
Yep. Yeah. This is when we go back and we may need to interview our stakeholders again, look at those use cases, but now we're, hopefully choosing from the list that we've prioritized, and then, going back and researching our existing tools, what's applicable, how can we address this use case, making sure that, we're looking at the data readiness, and then, move on as appropriate to pilot and then roll out. But yeah, absolutely. This is also, like you mentioned it, a lot of times these next use cases that you come to are ones that are extensions of existing use cases or tooling, right? So you've already rolled out the overall licensed, generative AI tools like Copilot. Now people see the opportunity to, get more value out of agents, like targeting certain knowledge sources or data sources, right? Or a certain business process, because now, okay, I understand it. I get how it works now. This is now a quick win if we could just enable this, HR policy agent on the HR site, and now everybody can prompt and quickly get the answers that we want. So you start to see this kind of an overlap sometimes between things you may have prioritized before and extensions of existing projects, I guess is what I'm getting at. So
yeah,
sometimes it's a little bit of it's you're going to repeat the process, but you're going to have multiple initiatives running at the same time.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I love being in this space, because in every conversation with a customer, we're hearing a new use case, right? Like there's no way you can wrap your head around every potential AI use case, not only today, but what does this look like 6 months from now and 6 years from now? We don't know. Like if we sat here and told you we knew, we'd be retired probably, because we'd be sitting on billions, right? We'd have created the tool already. So it's a really exciting space to be in. We've seen beyond just the generative AI and machine learning, we're keeping it fairly generic, because today we wanted to focus on the steps to success. But we're seeing amazing use cases that can be industry and vendor specific. I'll throw a couple at you. We attended a conference recently that showed a 3D rendering of a commercial property development that said, I want to build a hotel on this plot of land, and it had the GIS, design there. And it says, I want it to be 4 stories tall with 10 premier suite or premium suites, 20 junior suites, 100 standard rooms, X amount of parking spots, and it all needs to meet building codes for that area. And I want low cost supplies. It can build it, tell you how it spec'd everything, tell you how the supplies were created or the inventory of supplies, the bill of materials you would need. And then they added, well, the front third of that property has a floodplain, and automatically it adjusts. Well, now I want it 20 stories on the backside, but 4 stories on the front. It can scale everything. It was dynamically assigning the room spaces, just amazing progress, specific to an industry. We also see you've got a lot of project management background in the construction space, correlated but different. To fly a drone over a construction site, and the drone can then spit out a report and say, in the previous month, here's the activities that have been completed, and here's the ones that still need to be done.
Yep.
Think about time saved, getting people to remote locations, performing a very manual activity. We can do that all through robotics and automation, right?
Yep, different tools, but the same process applies, right? You want to understand, so those are very specific to certain functions or industries, but the same thing applies is like, let's understand, okay, this is probably a no-brainer tool, but I need to understand what are they doing with my data? What are all the concepts that we talked about before? Follow that process so that you can make sure that you've got proper governance over the use of that tool.
Absolutely, yeah. So we talked a lot around obviously being a big Microsoft partner, Copilot and Copilot Studio and agents and Azure AI Foundry. So I wanted to throw out some industry specific use cases because these are very real world deliverables that come out of following these steps, right? So identifying this is the digital transformation we're looking for from AI, or at least project number one. We can help you identify that and put the right team behind implementing.
Absolutely.
So this was awesome. I could do this every day with you. If you still have questions, hopefully we gave you more answers than questions. If you still have questions, I put my email on this final slide here. Feel free to copy that. If you know me already, give me a call. I'll talk to you while I'm having dinner. I'm very interested in leaning into all things AI. But we've also created an AI readiness assessment on our webpage. So if you want to apply some of this logic to your organization, it's a simple set of questions. You rate your organization on a scale of 1 to 5, and we'll give you a readout on your organization's readiness for artificial intelligence. Stephen, thank you for joining me. Any final thoughts to the audience? Put you on the spot.
My final thought is basically it's like the first step we talk about is the committee. You have to expand your knowledge of AI to tooling and projects beyond just IT, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really where you're going to get the value, because your business users have the use cases that you need to get the most bang out of the buck. And don't fool yourself if you don't think if you're not allowing them to use it, they'll find a way to use it. So this is really where
huge.
This process helps us put our arms around these tools. Generative AI has exploded the use of AI, but it's also empowered people to look at those other kinds of tooling and other kinds of technologies. So that's where this excitement and the need for process and controls and so forth comes in.
Yeah, and while it sounds like a lot, I'm glad you ended on that note that if we don't enable our workforce with some tooling, we're fooling ourselves if we think they're not going and using some commercially available off the shelf, whether free or paid, whether they've turned off the data modeling training from that data or not. You can take a photo of your fridge and it'll assess the ingredients you have in your fridge and create recipes for you, right? So your team members are using artificial intelligence. We need to give them something and then put some boundaries around it following these steps. So while this can sound lengthy, we're talking real transformative projects. There's also that low-hanging fruit where there's literally no cost, secure generative AI tools where we give AI to our users while we prioritize, while we work on these other functions. And we're seeing that be a great first step. So we're making progress, showing progress, getting those quick wins while we look at flying drones over construction sites to create monthly reports, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So very cool. Thank you again. This was really exciting. Again, if you have questions, feel free to follow up directly with me or Stephen and hit that AI readiness assessment to see more about your organization. Thanks for joining.